안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천을 하고 있는 동타왕코입니다. 추석 연휴가 3일이 지났죠. 이제 앞으로 이틀 남았죠. 저는 내일만 출근하면 쉽니다. 근데 하루밖에 안 쉬어요. 하루 쉬고 다시 또 6일을 또 1일을 해야 됩니다. 그래서 오늘은 운동을 많이 해야 되는데 최대한 하겠습니다. 진짜 최대한 할게요. 하겠습니다. 일단 하겠습니다. 뉴스를 봐야 되는데 CNN을 볼 건데 트럼프가 코로나에 걸렸죠. 진짜 너무 웃긴 것 같아요. 지금 뉴스에 나오고 있습니다. President Trump tests positive for coronavirus.
Ramifications on national security has ramifications on the election.
오늘 주식 엄청 떨어지겠죠, 미국. 월요일날 우리나라도 주식 엄청 떨어질 겁니다,
The
여러분.
ripple effects are just now being felt. We've seen reaction on world markets. We'll continue to track that throughout the day. But I just want to go over the timeline a little bit. The video you're seeing is Wednesday. That's Hope Hicks in the camel code with Stephen Miller, with Jared Kushner. They're heading Wednesday. They're going on Marine One. Then they're going to go over and fly on Air Force One to Minnesota with the president. From all we know, they're tested in the mornings. There's a report that Hope Hicks was tested Wednesday morning, was negative. We have not confirmed that. But what we have been told, and then that's the president getting on the plane, and that's Hope Hicks, Jared Kushner, getting on the aircraft Wednesday to fly to the president's event in Minnesota, a large rally. On the return trip, according to our Caitlin Collins, Hope Hicks started to feel symptoms, isolated herself on Air Force One, whatever that means. It's not that big an aircraft. We don't know exactly when she got tested. There's one report from another network saying it was Wednesday night she got tested and found out she was positive. We have not confirmed that. Thursday morning, it was known that she became positive. Some people in the White House knew, and that's really important because the president went to New Jersey Thursday for a meeting with donors for a fundraising trip. Some staff members, according to our Caitlin Collins, from the White House ended up not going on that trip because they had contact with Hope Hicks. The question is why the president was allowed to continue to make that trip, because he had clearly had contact. Hard to imagine the president hadn't already been tested. The president claims he was tested Thursday night and was, when he talked to Sean Hannity on Thursday night at 9, was still awaiting test results. That is hard to believe that the president didn't already know, but the president then announced they had tested positive at 1 a.m. on Twitter. So there's a lot of questions remaining about when the president knew, when Hope Hicks was tested, and exactly how many people knew and how they handled that information. And then, of course, there are all sorts of national security implications and implications on the election. Will the debates, 2 debates still scheduled for the presidential level, 1 vice presidential debate, will those still occur? Can they guarantee the safety of the candidates at any future debates? Unclear. Unclear if the Biden campaign would even agree to it, or if the president will be isolated for 14 days, will he hold any more rallies? So many questions still to be answered. Our coverage continues right now. I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks for watching.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, good morning, everyone. John Berman here along with Erica Hill, who is in for Allison, and we do have major breaking news. President Trump has tested positive for coronavirus, so has the First Lady. We were told a short time ago that they're in isolation in the White House residence. A letter released by the president's doctor says they are both well at this time. But what does that mean? Is the president exhibiting symptoms? We just don't know. That's one of the open questions this morning, exacerbated by the fact that, frankly, this White House can't be counted on for reliable information. Obviously, we wish the President and First Lady a speedy recovery. Transparency, though, of the utmost importance at this time. This is what we know and, frankly, don't. Top Trump aide Hope Hicks was diagnosed with coronavirus yesterday morning. We are told she began experiencing symptoms as early as Wednesday afternoon. Hicks has been traveling with the president and a lot of other members of the president's inner circle all week to the debate, to his rally in Minnesota. You can see the pictures right there. Now, to be clear, we don't know whether it was Hicks who infected the president. We do know that a small group of White House officials knew Hicks had tested positive yesterday, and the president still traveled to indoor events in New Jersey after.
As John pointed out, there's still so much we don't know. There are so
와,
many
진짜
questions this morning.
저
including
영상에
just how many
보면은
people
트럼프랑
come in contact with
트럼프
the president, the First
부부죠?
Lady and Hicks over the last few days.
멜라닌?
That contact tracing
멜라,
is actually
멜라,
going to
멜라
involve the
어쩌죠,
highest
근데?
levels of the U.S. government. We're
진짜
talking about cabinet
아무도
members,
마스크를
congressional
쓰고 있지
leaders,
않습니다.
potentially the president's new Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, not to mention all of those who were at events with these people over the last several days or who were close to them. Also this morning, how will the West Wing operate? There are national security and political implications here. Who will be allowed into the office? Can those with sensitive jobs work remotely if they're told to isolate? Joe Biden, meantime, shared a debate stage with the president for 90 minutes on Tuesday. Will any upcoming debates even happen? How does this impact the former vice president and those around him? We are pushing for answers on all of this. It is new information coming in by the minute. And as John pointed out, we need this morning transparency. CNN's Joe Johns live at the White House with this major breaking news. Joe, what are you seeing and hearing on the ground there at the White House?
Well, you know, given the fact that the president and his administration have flaunted the task force rules, especially the rules or guidelines when they come to mask wearing, this may be a shock to many of our viewers, but it certainly is not that much of a surprise. One thing you can say about this is the most serious health threat for a sitting president in decades, and certainly because the president of the United States is overweight. He's also 74 years old. That puts him in a high-risk zone for serious complications from coronavirus. So here's what we know. Around 1 o'clock this morning, the president announced on Twitter that he and the First Lady had tested positive for coronavirus and that they were going to isolate. Then we got the statement that came out from the White House doctor indicating that the president is going to try to carry on with business as usual. Of course, that's going to be very difficult to do under the circumstances. The president, a couple hours before he put out a statement on Twitter confirming that he was testing positive for coronavirus, he also indicated that his aide, Hope Hicks, longtime aide, had tested positive as well. So our reporting is that Hope Hicks started showing what could be called symptoms of COVID-19 on Air Force One on Wednesday, coming back from a campaign rally in Minnesota. And then apparently the White House was pretty sure that Hope Hicks had tested positive, at least by Thursday, perhaps Thursday morning. And the question, of course, right now is, why did the president fly out to New Jersey for his campaign finance, or I should say fundraising event there? Now, these are unanswerables, but as it stands now, the other question is, who did the president come into contact with? Who did Hope Hicks come into contact with? And who did those contacts come into contact with? These are things we simply do not know. And we're expecting more information from the White House, a ton of questions about, for example, why the White House press secretary held a news conference yesterday not wearing a mask, and did she know, in fact, that Hope Hicks had tested positive, and a slew of other questions. But for now, the White House remains open, walked through with no problem, no clear indication that anything much has changed. We do know this is a serious situation, and waiting to hear more from the administration. Back to you.
All right, Joe, please keep us posted. Please keep us posted what you see happening behind you. Very curious to see if people do show up to work in the West Wing, which is a pretty crowded area. And given now that several people, including the president of Hope Hicks, have tested positive, I'm not so sure it will be as active today as it has been in recent days. I also want to give you one other bit of breaking news we just got. We had an open-ended question about Joe Biden and his situation. CNN has learned that the former vice president will be tested this morning. The former vice president will be tested this morning. That is from a source with knowledge of the situation. Obviously, we will tell you when we know more about that test and the results. Joining us now, CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, and CNN Medical Analyst Dr. Jonathan Reiner. He is a professor of medicine at George Washington University and the cardiologist for former Vice President Dick Cheney. Sanjay, there are a series of questions we have this morning, but I do want to start with the president and his health. So a man in his 70s who is overweight with coronavirus, what is the health situation facing the president?
어,
this morning?
힘들어, 씨.
Yeah. Well, good morning, John. You know, first of all, let me just remind people that obviously, given the president's age and his pre-existing illnesses, he's going to be at increased risk from this disease. But I want to preface by saying, still, the odds are very much in his favor. I don't want to unsettle people too much with this. You know, greater than 90%, 95% chance that he will get through this still. But let me show you a little bit about the president. We know about his medical history. We know because of his age, 74 years old, because of his weight, because he has a common form of heart disease. Those things all
트럼프가
put him at
74세예요?
increased risk for the disease, for hospitalization. We can show you how much of an increased risk. Well, you know, a lot of this has to do with his age, you know, and that's really broken down. We've been looking at this data for some time. When you're at his age, 65 to 74,
대통령 한 번 더 하면은
it's about a 5 times
나이가 80이네요,
greater
그냥.
likelihood that someone would be hospitalized for this as compared to somebody younger. What we don't know, as you correctly pointed out, John, does he have symptoms? Is he sick at all? They say he's doing well. What does that mean? That's just not just a political curiosity question. It really matters now. We still don't have full vision on his past medical history, John. We know what they tell us, but you know, he had that strange visit to Walter Reed back in November. I raise it because it has medical relevance now. These things matter now in terms of the best way to approach the care of the president going forward. These are obviously things that his doctors are going to be talking about. But these are the types of things that you know, we need to know. We also we don't know when he was exposed, if he was exposed because of Hope Hicks or Hope Hicks was exposed because of him. How long ago was this likely exposure? It may have some relevance again in terms of how long he needs to be in isolation. Isolation is what he needs to do now, John, for probably up to 2 weeks. Isolation is different than quarantine. Isolation is for people who are infected with the virus. They have known disease. They got to be isolated. All the people that he came in contact with, had close contact with, more than 15 minutes within 6 feet, they need to be quarantined, not just tested. Tested's nice. It's important to have. But tests can come back false negative. They need to be quarantined. So, John, again, to your point, if you start thinking about this, the number of people that we're talking about, the highest levels of government, there's a lot of people over the next, today, will learn that they need to be in quarantine for possibly the next 2 weeks.
And just to pick up on that point, Dana, you spent a number of years at the White House. You know what it's like, not only the fact that it's tight quarters, but the sheer number of people who work in the West Wing, who could potentially come into contact with the president on a daily basis. Just put that in perspective for us, what this could mean to how the West Wing will or will not be functioning this morning.
It's almost incalculable. I was thinking about this, the ripple effects of what we have learned overnight. And it is the West Wing, of course, first and foremost, and we should say that we obviously hope that the president and the first lady are doing well, and Hope Hicks as well. But the fact is that when I talk about the ripple effects, it is that there are people in the West Wing, there's members of the cabinet, people in the West Wing who went to Capitol Hill, who met with senior leaders of the Senate leadership and I believe the House leadership. And then let's just add the third branch of government in, or the woman who wants to be on the third branch of government, Amy Coney Barrett, the president's nominee to take Ruth Bader Ginsburg's spot on the Supreme Court, has been at the White House. She has also been on Capitol Hill. So you have all of those just on surface level, all of those top people who have been potentially exposed, who are undoubtedly going to be asking their doctors, do I have to quarantine? So what if Mitch McConnell, the top Republican in the Senate, has to quarantine? What if Amy Coney Barrett the nominee has to quarantine? What if the president's chief of staff, the vice president? I mean, those are not far-fetched notions. Sanjay and Dr. Reiner can correct me if I'm wrong, but these people have been in contact in recent days.
Yeah, and Dr. Reiner, to you, and again, we just looked at some of those pictures, and we can show much more of them. What Dan is talking about is the entire top strata of the U.S. government, certainly of Republican leadership who have been in close contact with the president over the last week. Dr. Reiner, I suppose the first we learned or were told that the president tested positive was last night. Again, we're hampered by the fact that we get unreliable information from the White House. But if that is true, that's the first time they tested positive. What does that tell us about when he may have been infected himself? Is it possible he has been pre-symptomatic for days? Or Hope Hicks as well? How far could this have spread?
Certainly that's important. And actually, there's a key piece of data that we have to have, which is when was the last time the president was tested and was negative? We know that Dr. Connolly and his team test the president very frequently for the coronavirus. The reason it's important is that if he actually tested negative on Tuesday, the day of the debate, and it was a true negative, he was really likely probably not infectious on Tuesday, and that has consequences for others that attend to that, particularly the former vice president and anyone else in the room that day. So it would be very important for the White House to tell us when the last time the president tested negative. The White House is going to have to test everybody on Air Force One, everyone on Marine One. Dr. Brian Monahan, the physician for Congress, is going to have to start testing everyone who has been a secondary contact along the way. So there's a lot of work to be done. I do want to emphasize, first of all, that I too wish the president and the first lady very well, but there's no reason to panic now. The president is likely to do fine, as is the first lady, and there are systems in place to monitor him in the White House, video conferencing so he can continue to work if he feels well, and then finally constitutional processes that allow for the temporary transfer of power to the vice president should the president not feel up to the job for several days.
So we know that all of that's there. Sanjay, as we come back to, though, what we do know this morning, and we look at the situation in terms of the message that this sends, we know how the president has pushed back, both with his words and his actions, on the guidance that has come not only from his own White House task force, from the CDC. We know about the struggles that have happened behind the scenes. I know you have some reporting on that. You've spoken to a number of folks over the last several months about it. How does what we're seeing this morning put all of that into sharper focus?
오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다.
Eric, it's a good question. I don't know the answer because one thing is clear is that the president has known for some time how serious this disease can be. I mean, we heard the recorded conversation